We're back here tonight and continuing our coverage of Decision 2018 with NewsTalk and Anthony Brindisi, Congressman-elect, and we have a number of questions we want to ask him as he gets ready to head to Washington. The list goes on and on, but first, let's start with, I guess, the beginning, and that being the actual campaign, a very contentious race. Close race. Yeah. So first, have you heard from the Congresswoman?
We did exchange a few text messages last week. I texted her this morning. We're trying to set up a time to talk. I want to have a very smooth transition. I get sworn in on January 3rd. There's a lot that has to happen in that time period, getting our offices set up here and down in D.C., and I fully expect to have cooperation from her as she prepares to leave and we come in. We want to ensure a very smooth transition.
Okay, so speaking of the transition, moving forward here, list maybe your top 3 priorities.
Well, I think what I heard most on the campaign trail and what I want to focus on down in Washington are, first, infrastructure. There's been a lot of talk about spending on infrastructure, fixing our roads, our bridges, our sewer and water systems, our energy grid. That's something where I think we can find some bipartisan support down in Washington. The president's talked about that, and that's something I want to work on. I think ethics reform is a big issue that we got to work on, campaign finance reform, trying to get some of this dark money out of politics. Healthcare is a big issue that I heard a lot on the campaign trail. There are attacks right now on elements of the Affordable Care Act, like the protections for people with pre-existing conditions. I'd like to see some legislation passed that would strengthen the Affordable Care Act and specifically protect people who have pre-existing conditions so insurance companies cannot discriminate against them. And then finally, we have a crisis here in the state that's facing our farmers, especially our dairy farmers. Agriculture is a big part of this district, and that's something I want to focus on down in Washington.
All right, let's talk. That list you made, is that the order of priority, you think?
I think, all those, there's so many different priorities and so many things that we have to tackle down in Washington. Those are some of the immediate concerns that I see and what I've been hearing from voters out on the campaign trail.
Because I would suspect that many of your Democrat counterparts would want to focus in on health care. It seems that a lot of the Democrats that were coming from districts that were very, very blue, focused on health care over infrastructure, for example.
Right.
Infrastructure seems to me to be something that could cross party lines, both Republicans and Democrats. So how do you plan to, I guess with health care, find that happy medium?
Well, it seems like even people who were not supportive of the Affordable Care Act came around on the issue of pre-existing conditions. I don't know and haven't come across anyone who thinks that that protection that was put in place should be taken away. If you look at just the 22nd district alone, there's about 300,000 people in this congressional district that suffer from some form of pre-existing condition. The last thing I think we should be allowing is insurance companies to discriminate against people for not giving them coverage for that condition, for whatever it might be. So that's something where we should see some bipartisan support, and hopefully we can move forward on down in Washington.
This district seems to be a moderate district, obviously, with you being elected. But if you think about it, half of this district voted for you, the other half voted against you.
Yep.
How are you going to reach out to that other half that voted against you?
Well, as I said on the night of the election, to the people who supported my campaign, thank you. To those who did not vote for me, I'm going to continue to have an open door. I'm going to work on issues just as hard for people who did not support me as for those who did support me. I firmly believe that once elections are over, that's when the governing begins. And when people call my office, we're not going to ask them, are you a supporter or not a supporter? Are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? That does not matter to me. What matters is getting the assistance to those folks who reach out to our office.
And now campaign promises. So one of the things that we saw, I would say a lot with every ad, I know, connecting you to Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
So the question now is, and I see that a lot of people on the hard left want you to go against what you campaigned on and vote for her as Speaker of the House. Where are you on that now?
I'm sticking to my commitment. I think the worst thing I could do is to break a promise that I made on the first vote that I'm going to be taking in the House of Representatives. I said during the campaign I'm not going to support Nancy Pelosi. I'm not going to vote for her when I get down to Washington. That's something I campaigned on, and I don't intend to break that commitment.
Does that put Democrats, though, in Washington, for example, at a disadvantage not having that experience? Because like her or not, she does have the experience in Washington.
She definitely has the experience, but a lot of members, especially new members like myself, campaigned on change in Washington, a change in leadership on both sides of the aisle. There's a number of members in the House of Representatives who are very talented, who could fulfill that role as Speaker, and I'm looking forward to others, I think, stepping up in the near future who can be able to give her a challenge.
All right, and then just housekeeping. So when do you head back to Washington? Because you've had orientation, right?
Yeah, we had 1 week of orientation. I actually head back tomorrow. I'll be down there for this week for new member orientation, and then I'll be back in the district for the rest of the month, getting our offices set up so we can be prepared on January 3rd to start responding to phone calls.
And then how does it work office-wise? Do you take the office that the Congresswoman was in, or is it a different spot?
That's an option. You can take the office that the previous member was in. You can seek a new office. We're still trying to figure out what we're going to do with that. Actually, in Washington on Friday, they have the office lottery. I will not get to take her office down in Washington. You have to pick a new office, and depending on where you are in that lottery, you can get a very nice office for a freshman, or you may get an office that's on the 5th floor in some broom closet or something like that.
Well, that happens. All right. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. Anthony Brindisi, Congressman-elect.